Okay, this is about a very small study that we did looking at the usability of a virtual reality device to teach basic life support. So just to give you a bit of background on this, the simulation for digital health is a part of our enterprise at London South Bank University. It's funded partly by the university, partly by the European Regional Development Fund, which I assume will be not for much longer, and partly by a Greater London Council. And the idea is that this is to support commercial startups that are producing equipment for digital health simulation. So just the background of this, obviously, large number of adult cardiac arrest cases in the UK every year, and we know that immediate initiation of CPR is going to make a significant increase in the ability of somebody to survive this. Virtual reality devices certainly we think it could be useful here, but we don't really know how useful this is as a training tool. So Jill Good Health is a commercial company, and they approached us via Digital Health to carry out a usability study on their device. Unfortunately, the pictures you see of the two founders really are rather obscured by the VR masks. Perhaps they didn't want to be recognised, but these, Morgan and Anna, come from a background of writing for the gaming industry. So they don't come from a health background at all. And the history of getting into this was that Anna had attended a basic life support bystander course, and she thought actually this is something they could do. So we wanted to look at the prototype, and at the time we looked at it, the tool wasn't completely finished, but it was in a reasonably advanced stage of its development. We recruited 23 adult staff members from the university. Now these were not necessarily people from health, they were staff from all over the university. They weren't all academics, they were a whole range of different members of staff. And we exposed them to the virtual reality experience for 5 minutes. The participants completed a pre and post questionnaire, and then we had a focus group discussion a week later afterwards. So we collected some quantitative data, which we've made some analysis of the descriptions there. And what we really wanted to do was collect some qualitative data around the experience and how the users felt around the experience. So generally, most participants did really well. Now, perhaps they volunteered to be part of the experience because actually they had some knowledge of CPR, and they wanted to sort of practice that knowledge, but actually the scores were really quite high. The device is quite good at actually picking up quality of compressions, and this is really where probably the best advantage of the device are shown, really, because it'll pick up the speed of the compressions and give a feedback at the end. It'll pick up the depth of the compressions and how early the compressions were started. So much similar to the feedback we get from our sort of advanced high fidelity mannequins. So most people found their confidence was increased, and they performed quite well. So in the focus group discussions, we identified 4 main themes around experience and expectations, the performance of the device and the feedback from the device, how participants interacted and became immersed in the device, and the potential for future use. So we had 2 groups. Group A were recruited, they were only small groups. So Group A were 10 participants who were people who had undertaken basic life support training within the last 2 years. Group B may have had some basic life support training, but nothing for the previous 2 years. It may have been several years since they'd undertaken any training in that area. Remember, these are not necessarily health professionals. And as you can see, there's some quite reasonable scores, and as you might expect, of course, those that have had previous training generally scored slightly better. There was one person in Group B who was giving some very interesting compressions of giving 5 and then stopping and then giving another 5, which was quite interesting. They didn't score very well, as you might imagine. So looking at our questionnaire pre and post, I think some of the results there, as much as you might be expected. The group who had not undertaken recent training, Group B, I suspect that some of them may have volunteered to be part of the situation, part of the experience, was because they had an interest in VR anyway, which probably actually impacted on their overall experience. But overall, all the participants were quite happy with their scoring and their ability, and they did get a quick chance to have a look at the sort of digital scoring and the feedback, the digital feedback they got at the end of the experience there. Most of them enjoyed that experience, although some of them did have some reservations, particularly when we came to do the focus groups around usability of the equipment mainly. In terms of looking at agreement, so the level of agreement, so generally they found the information reasonably easy to understand, and one of the difficulties they had was placing the emergency call, because in the VR environment, clearly and this was something that was commented on in a lot of the comments we got on the focus groups, was that the virtual hands aren't really where the real hands are. And of course, they're trying to make an emergency call using a virtual telephone keypad, and of course, they're using the virtual hands. Of course, people weren't always that good at actually placing that call. But generally, people who had had experience in VR were better at that sort of engagement. But overall, most of the participants felt that actually had got a use in future BLS training. So when we looked at the focus groups, we used NVivo to document and help with some of the analysis of all this. We had a lot of initial themes, and we eventually brought those down to 4 main groups. So generally on experience, most people found it interesting. There were some negative feelings. This was mainly, they were mainly voiced by participants who had not used VR before and weren't happy with the either the comfort, wearing the headphones, wearing the overall VR goggles, and felt a little bit out of their normal experience. Most of them reported positively on the experience, and most of them actually enjoyed the experience. Some of the participants commented on their comparison between doing basic life support on a normal mannequin and that's doing the same mannequin but actually in the VR environment. And actually, generally, they found that was useful. Some were quite concerned about the environment, because the environment we used for this particular test was an out-of-hospital environment in a dark alley, which didn't really please everybody. However, that's an easily changeable thing. It can be a hospital environment on a trolley. This particular one was on the floor, out of hospital. Some participants didn't get on very well with the safety aspect of checking prior to actually delivering because there was a cable, and they did, in the VR experience, moving the cable out of the way is something quite strange. You have to sort of bring your hand forward and hook the cable out, which is one of the didn't go down particularly well with quite a lot of participants there. Looking at their performance, generally they found assessment was. They thought the assessment feedback was quite good, particularly in the fact the detailed feedback it gave about the depth of compressions and the speed of compressions and their overall score from that. They've generally felt it improved their confidence. Some of the participants didn't find the instructions very clear, and these tended to be participants who hadn't previous experience of VR. I think perhaps they were not looking in the right place in instructions. Initially, there's a person actually telling you instructions on what to do, and they didn't always find that very clear. There was some visual feedback they got during the actual experience, which comes up on the screen in front of them. But not everybody managed to see that because they were concentrating so much on actually delivering the compressions, they didn't actually look up to see the visual feedback, which gave them an idea on how they were getting on with their compressions. And there was some audio feedback. Not everybody picked up on the audio feedback. Most people found that the body was quite good in terms of interaction. The body was a standard Laerdal mannequin with a position sensor attached to it. So when they actually gave the actual compressions, the body was in the right place. The downside was they found that the virtual hands weren't quite where they expected them to be, and that was commented on quite frequently. The phone didn't go down terribly well. That was a bit of a problem. I believe that's since been changed. At the time of testing, there wasn't any airway management. This was only about compressions, and I believe that has been developed since. I haven't seen it since. Not everybody found the glasses and the comfort very easy to manage, but most commented that it was quite realistic. And they did comment on the danger aspect of being in the dark alley. Would they really want to be giving resuscitating somebody in a dark alley? And they comment on the environment similarly there. Most of the participants felt there was potential for this tool, and could it be used for children? And they felt that children may have be more used to using virtual reality devices, so they may actually work quite well with this device. They thought it was useful in teaching, and it was potential. They felt generally there was some possible things to go forward with. And some of the comments people made about the experience, about VR. Not everybody gets on well with VR. There was only one person that actually commented she started feeling sick after 10 minutes, but it only lasted 5 minutes. So some people, yes, commented on it. There were a few comments around the hands not being quite where they thought the hands would be, and they were generally from people that hadn't had previous VR experience. And one person was giving good compressions but got a low score, probably because she kept stopping, and wasn't very happy with that one. And so I commented on the environment there, and the wristbands were the sensors to determine where the hands were. So when the hands were crossed together, the wrist would show on the virtual hands. But not everybody got on very well with those. But they liked the idea that it could be used anywhere, and of course the environment background can be changed. So just to conclude on this, really, virtual reality, it is relatively novel. It seemed to be effective, certainly in this case, and most people really enjoyed the experience. Certainly, I think we were looking at the tool at only partway through its overall development, and I believe the tool has been developed a bit further since then. But how does that fit into the broader context of training? Would it be appropriate for more advanced training? Could we use it for health professionals in more advanced scenarios? And we felt that actually there was some potential there. And certainly novice users probably need more preparation and a little bit more feedback, because if they've never had any VR experience, the experience itself is quite new to them. But expert users seem to get on much better with the overall experience. And certainly there's some issues potentially around accreditation and quality control. The technical feedback was very good and very accurate. but some of the soft feedback, maybe could do with some consideration. And so, we've submitted it for to Simulation Healthcare, and we're just waiting to hear after our review.
Thank you very much.